Composure under extreme duress represents one of the most remarkable demonstrations of human self-control and strategic thinking. What transpired on the Family Feud stage in March 2025 would become a masterclass in maintaining dignity while preparing to deliver devastating truth at precisely the right moment. Steve Harvey had witnessed countless emotional moments during his tenure as host, from tears of joy to occasional conflicts between family members. However, nothing in his extensive experience prepared him for what would unfold when a woman who had smiled pleasantly throughout an entire game show taping would finally speak words that would irrevocably end her marriage and expose deception that had persisted for years. The incident demonstrates that silence and composure do not necessarily indicate acceptance or ignorance, but rather can represent strategic patience while awaiting the appropriate moment for truth to be revealed. On this particular afternoon, one woman's ability to maintain perfect external calm while internally processing devastating knowledge would culminate in a revelation that left the studio audience stunned and demonstrated that the most powerful confrontations sometimes come from those who choose their timing with precision and intention. Before examining this extraordinary sequence of events that illustrates the strength required to maintain composure while preparing to confront profound betrayal, please take a moment to support our channel by selecting the like option and subscribing to ensure you receive these significant Family Feud moments that provide valuable lessons about dignity, strategic timing, and the courage to speak truth even when doing so will irrevocably change your life. The Bennett family from Minneapolis, Minnesota entered the Family Feud stage with what appeared to be typical enthusiasm and family cohesion. Leading the group was Thomas Bennett, a 47-year-old insurance executive whose commanding presence and confident demeanor suggested professional success and personal authority. Beside him stood his wife of 19 years, Elizabeth Bennett, an elegant woman with a serene expression who worked as a pediatric nurse. Their family team included Thomas's cousin Andrew, Elizabeth's best friend Sarah, and their neighbor Robert, creating a composition that represented both family and community relationships. Steve Harvey conducted the standard pre-game conversation with characteristic warmth and humor. Thomas responded with practiced ease, describing their life in Minneapolis, his work in the insurance industry, and their excitement about appearing on Family Feud. Elizabeth contributed to the conversation with appropriate responses delivered with a pleasant smile, appearing supportive and engaged without dominating the interaction. Her demeanor suggested contentment and partnership, giving no indication of the knowledge she carried or the intentions she had formed regarding how this television appearance would conclude. The game commenced with standard competitive energy. The Bennett family faced the Rodriguez family from Chicago, and the early rounds demonstrated strong performance from both teams. Thomas proved to be an assertive team captain, coordinating responses and celebrating correct answers with enthusiasm. Elizabeth participated when called upon, providing thoughtful answers and maintaining her pleasant, composed expression throughout. To all observers, she appeared to be enjoying the experience and supporting her husband's leadership of their team effort. What nobody in the studio could perceive was that Elizabeth had discovered information 2 weeks prior to the Family Feud taping that had fundamentally altered her understanding of her marriage and her plans for her future. She had learned something that represented not merely infidelity or financial deception, but rather a betrayal so profound that it made continuation of the marriage impossible. However, rather than confronting Thomas immediately upon discovery, Elizabeth had made the strategic decision to maintain complete normalcy while she consulted attorneys, secured financial documentation, and prepared for the separation that she knew must follow. The Family Feud appearance, scheduled months earlier before her discovery, represented an opportunity that Elizabeth had decided to utilize for purposes that Thomas could not anticipate. Understanding the full significance of what would unfold requires comprehensive knowledge of the Bennett marriage and the specific betrayal that Elizabeth had discovered. Thomas and Elizabeth had met 21 years earlier through mutual friends in Minneapolis. Thomas was establishing himself in the insurance industry, ambitious and focused on building professional success. Elizabeth was completing her nursing degree dedicated to pediatric care and committed to making a difference in children's lives. Their relationship developed over 2 years of courtship, characterized by shared values regarding family, professional achievement, and building a stable, comfortable life together. The marriage that followed appeared successful by conventional measures. Thomas advanced steadily in his insurance career, eventually becoming a senior executive at a major regional firm with substantial income and professional recognition. Elizabeth built a respected career in pediatric nursing at a well-regarded children's hospital, finding deep satisfaction in caring for sick children and supporting their families through medical crises. They maintained an active social life, were respected members of their community, and presented the image of a stable, successful couple who had built a good life together. However, beneath this appearance of domestic success, the Bennett marriage had developed the kind of emotional distance and routine that can occur when two people become so focused on their individual professional lives that they neglect the intimate connection that initially brought them together. Thomas worked long hours and traveled frequently for industry conferences and client meetings. Elizabeth maintained demanding hospital shifts that included nights and weekends. They functioned effectively as partners in managing their household and maintaining their social obligations, but the deeper emotional and romantic connection had gradually diminished over years of prioritizing everything except their relationship. The absence of children in their marriage represented a source of ongoing grief for Elizabeth, though she and Thomas had publicly framed their childlessness as a choice rather than acknowledging the fertility challenges and unsuccessful treatments they had pursued for several years early in their marriage. Elizabeth had eventually made peace with their situation by channeling her maternal instincts into her pediatric nursing career, finding purpose in caring for other people's children. However, she had always assumed that she and Thomas shared the grief of childlessness and had supported each other through that disappointment. 2 weeks before the Family Feud taping, Elizabeth had discovered information that shattered this assumption and revealed a deception that went beyond anything she had imagined possible. While organizing documents for their annual tax preparation, she found records of regular substantial payments that Thomas had been making to a woman named Jennifer Morrison for the previous 12 years. Further investigation revealed that Jennifer Morrison was the mother of Thomas's 11-year-old daughter, a child conceived during a brief affair that had occurred during a period when Elizabeth and Thomas had been pursuing their final round of fertility treatments before accepting that they would not have biological children. The revelation was devastating on multiple levels. Thomas had fathered a child with another woman during the exact period when Elizabeth was undergoing painful medical procedures in an attempt to conceive. He had maintained this secret for over a decade, making regular support payments while allowing Elizabeth to believe that they were childless together, sharing the grief of infertility. He had watched Elizabeth pour her maternal instincts into caring for other people's children, while never revealing that he had a daughter of his own. The deception represented not merely infidelity, but a fundamental betrayal of their shared experience and a profound disregard for Elizabeth's emotional reality. Elizabeth's initial response to this discovery had been shock so complete that she had spent several days in a state of emotional paralysis, unable to process the magnitude of what Thomas had hidden from her for over a decade. However, as the shock began to subside, it was replaced by a cold, clear anger and a determination to handle the situation strategically rather than emotionally. She consulted with a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving hidden assets and deception. She gathered comprehensive documentation of Thomas's financial payments to Jennifer Morrison and evidence of the child's existence. She prepared for divorce proceedings while maintaining complete normalcy in her daily interactions with Thomas, giving him no indication that she had discovered his secret. The Family Feud appearance had been scheduled 6 months earlier as a fun activity that Thomas had suggested as a way for them to do something together outside their normal routine. Elizabeth's initial inclination, after discovering Thomas's betrayal, had been to cancel the appearance, but after reflection and consultation with her attorney, she decided that the taping could serve a purpose. She would allow Thomas one final public appearance as a happily married couple, would maintain perfect composure throughout the experience, and then would reveal her knowledge at a moment of her choosing in a manner that would make clear that she was in control of how their marriage would end. The game continued with both families demonstrating strong competitive performance. The Bennett family had taken a solid lead heading into the later rounds, with Thomas clearly pleased by their success. He celebrated enthusiastically with each correct answer, high-fiving team members and playing to the studio audience. Elizabeth maintained her pleasant, composed expression throughout, participating appropriately and showing no signs of the knowledge she carried or the intentions she had formed. During several rounds, survey questions touched on topics related to marriage, honesty, and family relationships. When these questions arose, Elizabeth maintained her serene demeanor while providing thoughtful answers that appeared completely sincere. At one point, a question asked contestants to name something that spouses should never keep secret from each other. Elizabeth's response was, "Having children," delivered with a slight smile and no indication that the answer held personal significance beyond being a logical survey response. The answer appeared on the board as the number 3 response, and the game continued without anyone recognizing the deeper meaning that the answer held for Elizabeth. Steve Harvey, always observant of family dynamics, noticed that Elizabeth seemed remarkably calm and centered compared to many contestants who displayed nervous energy or anxiety about performance. During a brief exchange, he commented on her composure and asked whether she was always so serene or whether she had special techniques for managing stress. Elizabeth responded that she had learned through her work as a pediatric nurse to maintain calm in difficult situations, that showing anxiety or distress served no useful purpose, and that she preferred to process emotions privately while maintaining appropriate external presentation. The response was delivered with a warm smile and seemed to reflect admirable professional competence and emotional maturity. What Steve could not perceive was that Elizabeth's composure represented not merely professional training, but rather the specific self-control of someone who had made strategic decisions about how and when to reveal devastating knowledge. She had spent 2 weeks maintaining this exact demeanor with Thomas, smiling pleasantly while organizing divorce paperwork, asking about his day while documenting his deception, maintaining normalcy while preparing to dismantle their life together. The Family Feud taping represented simply another context requiring the same controlled presentation that she had been maintaining since her discovery. The game concluded with the Bennett family winning decisively and advancing to the fast money round. Thomas was jubilant, celebrating the victory with obvious satisfaction and already discussing how they would spend or invest the potential $20,000 prize. Elizabeth maintained her pleasant smile and appropriate enthusiasm, giving no indication that she had different plans for any money they might win. Steve selected Thomas and Elizabeth as the 2 family members who would participate in Fast Money, with Thomas going first while Elizabeth was taken backstage to prevent her from hearing the questions and answers. Thomas approached the Fast Money podium with confidence and performed well, scoring 162 points across the 5 questions. His performance meant that Elizabeth would need to contribute only 38 additional points to reach the 200-point threshold necessary to win the grand prize. As Thomas completed his round, he made a comment to Steve about how Elizabeth would certainly secure the necessary points because she was smarter than people realized, delivered with a patronizing tone that suggested he viewed her intelligence as surprising rather than expected. The comment registered with several audience members as subtly dismissive, though Thomas appeared oblivious to how it might be received. Elizabeth was brought back to the stage for her portion of the Fast Money round. She took her position at the podium with the same serene composure she had maintained throughout the entire taping. Steve offered encouragement and began the rapid-fire questioning. Elizabeth answered each of the 5 questions thoughtfully and deliberately, taking slightly more time than many Fast Money contestants, but providing solid responses that demonstrated good judgment. As the answers were revealed, it became clear that she had indeed exceeded the 38 points required, bringing the Bennett family total well above $200,000. and securing the $20,000 prize. The studio erupted in celebration as the winning total was revealed. Confetti fell from the ceiling, the family team gathered for hugs and congratulations, and Thomas appeared thoroughly pleased with their success. Steve Harvey prepared to conduct the standard post-victory interview and presentation of the oversized ceremonial check that would be photographed for promotional purposes. However, as the celebration began to settle and Steve turned to address Thomas and Elizabeth about their victory, Elizabeth raised her hand in a gesture that requested attention and indicated she had something to say. Steve, always responsive to contestants who wanted to share reactions or expressions of gratitude, immediately gave Elizabeth the floor. The studio quieted as audience members and family team members turned their attention to the woman who had smiled pleasantly throughout the entire taping and was now preparing to speak. Elizabeth's expression remained serene and composed, showing no signs of anger or distress that might have prepared observers for what she was about to reveal. She thanked Steve for his hosting and for creating a welcoming environment, then turned to address Thomas directly. Elizabeth stated in a clear, steady voice that she had something important to share with Thomas and with everyone present. She explained that 2 weeks earlier, while preparing documents for their tax filing, she had discovered records of regular payments that Thomas had been making to a woman named Jennifer Morrison. She stated that further investigation had revealed that Thomas had fathered a daughter with this woman 11 years ago, during the exact period when Elizabeth had been undergoing fertility treatments in an attempt to conceive a child with her husband. She explained that Thomas had maintained this secret for over a decade while allowing Elizabeth to believe that they were childless together, sharing the grief of infertility that she now understood had been hers alone. The revelation created absolute silence in the studio. The shock was so complete that for several seconds, no one moved or spoke. Thomas's face transformed from celebratory satisfaction to horror as he realized that Elizabeth had known about his secret for 2 weeks, while giving him no indication that she had discovered anything. Steve Harvey stood frozen, processing information that represented a level of deception and betrayal that extended far beyond typical marital infidelity. The other family team members looked at each other in confusion and disbelief, uncertain whether they had correctly understood what Elizabeth had just revealed. Elizabeth continued speaking, her voice remaining steady and her expression maintaining its serene composure. She stated that she had filed for divorce earlier that week, that Thomas would be served with papers within the next few days, and that she had gathered comprehensive documentation of his financial payments and his deception. She explained that she had maintained normal interactions with Thomas for the 2 weeks since her discovery, while consulting with attorneys and preparing strategically for the separation, and that she had chosen to reveal her knowledge publicly on Family Feud because she wanted witnesses to Thomas's reaction and because she was finished protecting him from the consequences of his choices. She turned to address Steve and the studio audience directly. She explained that she had smiled throughout the entire taping not because she was happy or because everything was fine, but because she had learned over 2 weeks of living with devastating knowledge to maintain composure while processing profound betrayal. She stated that the hardest part of discovering Thomas's secret had not been the infidelity itself, but rather the recognition that he had allowed her to grieve their childlessness while he had a daughter he was supporting financially, but had never acknowledged to his wife. She explained that she had poured her maternal instincts into caring for other people's children through her nursing career while Thomas had an actual child that he kept completely separate from their shared life. Thomas attempted to respond, beginning with denials before shifting to minimizations and attempts to provide context for his choices. He stated that the affair had been a brief mistake during a difficult period in their marriage, that he had only learned of the pregnancy after it was too late to influence the outcome, and that he had made the decision to support the child financially while keeping the situation separate from his marriage to Elizabeth, because he had not wanted to hurt her with information about a child she could not have. The explanation was delivered with increasing desperation as Thomas recognized that the audience and even his own family team members were reacting with obvious disapproval and judgment. Elizabeth's response to Thomas's attempted justification demonstrated the depth of thought she had given to this moment over the previous 2 weeks. She stated that Thomas had not kept the secret to protect her from pain, but rather to protect himself from accountability and consequences. She explained that he had deprived her of the opportunity to make informed decisions about their marriage for over a decade, had allowed her to invest years of emotional energy and professional dedication into their childless life together, while he was actually a father supporting a daughter. She stated that the deception represented not merely betrayal of their marriage vows, but fundamental disrespect for her autonomy and her right to understand the actual circumstances of her life. Steve Harvey, who had remained largely silent during this exchange, while recognizing that his role was to provide space for truth to be spoken rather than to intervene or redirect, finally addressed the situation directly. He stated that in all his years of hosting Family Feud, he had never witnessed anything comparable to what had just occurred. He acknowledged that Elizabeth had demonstrated remarkable composure and strategic thinking, but he expressed concern for the emotional toll that maintaining such control while processing devastating betrayal must have required. He asked Elizabeth directly how she had managed to smile throughout the entire taping while carrying the knowledge of Thomas's deception. Elizabeth's response provided insight into the psychological process she had navigated over the previous 2 weeks. She explained that the initial discovery had produced shock so complete that she had felt numb and disconnected from reality. However, as the shock subsided, she had recognized that emotional reaction without strategic planning would put her at a disadvantage during divorce proceedings. She had made the deliberate decision to channel her anger and grief into preparation and documentation rather than immediate confrontation. She stated that maintaining composure had actually been easier than expected because her predominant emotion was not sadness but rather a cold, clear determination to handle the situation on her own terms rather than reacting to Thomas's timeline or prey. The immediate aftermath of Elizabeth's revelation involved Steve Harvey making the decision to conclude the taping while ensuring that Elizabeth had access to support resources and that the production team documented the situation appropriately. The $20,000 prize remained legally payable to the Bennett family as they had won the game fairly, but the question of how those funds would be distributed became immediately complicated by the impending divorce proceedings. Elizabeth stated clearly that she intended to donate her portion of any winnings to organizations supporting children and families affected by parental abandonment, making clear her intention to transform even this game show prize into a statement about Thomas's choices. The episode, when it eventually aired with extensive editing to protect privacy while preserving the essential truth of what had occurred, sparked intensive national conversation about deception in marriage. The specific betrayal of keeping biological children secret from a spouse, and the psychological strength required to maintain composure while processing devastating betrayal. The incident resonated particularly strongly with women who had experienced infertility or who had discovered that partners had been less than truthful about major life circumstances. Elizabeth's strategic approach to confrontation rather than immediate emotional reaction became a subject of analysis among relationship counselors and divorce attorneys who recognized both the effectiveness and the psychological cost of such controlled response. Thomas Bennett faced immediate and severe consequences across multiple dimensions of his life. The divorce proceedings moved forward rapidly given Elizabeth's extensive preparation and documentation. Her attorney utilized the Family Feud footage as powerful evidence of Thomas's character and his pattern of deception, demonstrating that his dishonesty extended beyond the specific secret about his daughter to a general willingness to manipulate and control information to suit his interests. The settlement negotiations were conducted from a position of significant advantage for Elizabeth, as Thomas recognized that protracted litigation would only extend public scrutiny of his deception and further damage his professional and social reputation. The professional consequences for Thomas were substantial. Several major clients of his insurance firm expressed concern about being represented by someone whose personal character had been so publicly revealed to involve sustained deception and disregard for basic honesty. His employer, a conservative insurance company that valued reputation and trustworthiness, conducted a review of Thomas's professional conduct and client relationships. While his employment was not immediately terminated, he was removed from certain high-profile accounts and his advancement within the firm was essentially halted. Colleagues and professional associates maintained formal courtesy but distanced themselves from someone whose judgment and integrity had been so thoroughly compromised. The revelation also created crisis for Jennifer Morrison and Thomas's daughter, who had previously existed in complete separation from Thomas's marriage and public life. Jennifer had been aware of Thomas's marriage, but had believed his representations that Elizabeth knew about the child and had chosen not to be involved. Learning that Thomas had concealed his daughter's existence from his wife for over a decade complicated Jennifer's understanding of the situation and her own role in it. She had to explain to an 11-year-old child that her father had kept her secret from his wife, creating questions and confusion about why she had been hidden and what that suggested about her value or importance to her father. Elizabeth Bennett navigated the immediate aftermath of the revelation with the same strategic composure she had maintained during the 2 weeks between discovery and confrontation. She took a brief leave from her nursing position to process the emotional impact and manage divorce proceedings. She engaged in intensive therapy to work through the complicated feelings surrounding Thomas's betrayal, the loss of the marriage she had believed she had, and the recognition that she had been grieving a shared childlessness that had never actually been shared. She connected with support organizations for women dealing with infidelity and deception, finding value in sharing her experience with others who had discovered that their understanding of their marriages had been fundamentally false. 6 months following the Family Feud revelation, Elizabeth agreed to an extensive interview with a national publication about her experience and her decision to reveal Thomas's deception publicly. The interview provided deeper context about her thought process and the specific reasons she had chosen public confrontation over private handling of the situation. Elizabeth explained that Thomas's deception had been so profound and had persisted for so long that she believed it deserved public accountability rather than quiet resolution. She stated that Thomas had controlled information and narrative throughout their marriage, and that she had wanted to reclaim control by choosing how and when the truth would be revealed. The interview addressed questions about whether Elizabeth regretted the public nature of the confrontation or wished she had handled the situation privately. Elizabeth's response was nuanced and thoughtful. She acknowledged that public revelation had created complications and that the Family Feud footage would exist permanently as documentation of the most painful moment of her life. However, she stated that the public nature of the confrontation had also created accountability and had prevented Thomas from controlling the narrative or minimizing his deception. She explained that private confrontation would have allowed Thomas to frame the situation in ways that served his interests, whereas public revelation had created witnesses and had established truth in a manner that could not be disputed or reinterpreted. 1 year after the Family Feud incident, Elizabeth had established a new life characterized by independence, professional engagement, and connection to a supportive community. The divorce had been finalized with a settlement that provided appropriate financial support and acknowledged the harm caused by Thomas's sustained deception. She had returned to her pediatric nursing position and had found renewed purpose in her work, though she acknowledged that caring for children now carried different emotional resonance given her knowledge that Thomas had a daughter he had hidden throughout their marriage. She had become an advocate for honesty and transparency in relationships, speaking at support groups and conferences about recognizing deception and trusting instincts when something feels wrong even if specific proof is not immediately available. Thomas experienced ongoing consequences that extended well beyond the immediate shock of public exposure. His relationship with his daughter became more complicated as she grew older and better understood the circumstances of her father's deception. She struggled with questions about why she had been kept secret and whether that suggested something deficient about her worth or her father's commitment to her. Thomas's attempts to maintain relationship with his daughter were challenged by her growing awareness that he had prioritized protecting his marriage and reputation over acknowledging her openly. The relationship that might have developed more naturally had he been honest from the beginning became fraught with betrayal and broken trust that proved difficult to repair. 3 years following the family feud revelation, Elizabeth had become a prominent voice in discussions about deception in marriage and the specific emotional trauma of discovering that a spouse has biological children they have kept secret. She contributed to articles and participated in podcasts and interviews, using her experience to help others recognize that certain betrayals make reconciliation impossible, and that choosing to end a marriage in response to profound deception represents strength rather than failure. She emphasized that her strategic approach to confrontation had been necessary for her specific situation, but that others should make choices appropriate to their circumstances and should not feel obligated to maintain composure in the face of betrayal simply because she had done so. Steve Harvey referenced the Bennett family incident frequently across his various media platforms as an example of the remarkable psychological strength some individuals demonstrate in the face of devastating betrayal. He used Elizabeth's story to discuss the difference between reactive emotion and strategic response, acknowledging that while immediate emotional expression represented valid response to betrayal, strategic preparation before confrontation could provide advantages in terms of legal protection and personal empowerment. He emphasized that the most remarkable aspect of the situation had been Elizabeth's ability to maintain perfect composure for 2 weeks while living with someone who had deceived her profoundly, suggesting psychological fortitude that went beyond what most people could sustain. 5 years after that remarkable family feud taping, when Elizabeth smiled pleasantly throughout an entire game show before revealing the secret that would end her marriage, she reflected on the experience in a memoir titled Composure, Finding Strength in Strategic Silence. The book explored the psychological process of discovering profound betrayal, the decision to respond strategically rather than emotionally, and the techniques she had used to maintain external calm while internal processing devastating truth. The memoir became a significant resource for people navigating similar situations, providing both validation for the pain of discovery and practical guidance for managing the period between learning of deception and confronting it. The book addressed specifically the question that many people asked Elizabeth: why had she smiled throughout the entire family feud taping instead of confronting Thomas immediately or canceling the appearance? Elizabeth explained that maintaining composure had served multiple purposes. It had allowed her to complete necessary preparation without alerting Thomas to her knowledge. It had provided her with control over timing and setting of the revelation rather than allowing circumstances to dictate when confrontation would occur. It had demonstrated to herself that she possessed strength and self-control even in the most difficult circumstances. Most significantly, it had created a powerful contrast between her composed demeanor throughout the taping and the devastating revelation that followed, making clear to everyone present that her composure represented strategic choice rather than ignorance or acceptance. The memoir also explored the specific pain of Thomas's particular deception. Not merely that he had fathered a child with another woman, but that he had maintained this secret during and after Elizabeth's unsuccessful fertility treatments, allowing her to grieve childlessness that she now understood had been hers alone rather than theirs together. Elizabeth wrote powerfully about the violation represented by watching her channel maternal instincts into her nursing career while Thomas had an actual daughter he kept completely separate from their shared life. She explained that this dimension of the betrayal had made reconciliation impossible because it demonstrated such fundamental disregard for her emotional reality and such profound willingness to manipulate her understanding of their shared experience. 10 years after the family feud revelation, Elizabeth had built a life that reflected authentic values and genuine relationships rather than the carefully maintained appearance that had characterized her marriage to Thomas. She had remarried to a fellow healthcare professional whose commitment to honesty and transparency aligned with her post-divorce priorities. She maintained her advocacy work while focusing primarily on her nursing career and her personal relationships. She occasionally appeared in media discussions about deception and divorce, but she had moved beyond defining herself primarily through Thomas's betrayal and had built an identity based on her professional contributions and personal growth. Thomas Bennett experienced lasting consequences for his choices that extended across the decade following the exposure. His relationship with his daughter remained complicated by the initial deception and the public nature of its revelation. His professional reputation never fully recovered from the association with sustained dishonesty that the family feud incident had established. His subsequent relationships were challenged by the reality that potential partners had access to documentation of his capacity for elaborate, long-term deception. He engaged in therapy and reportedly worked to understand the entitlement and compartmentalization that had enabled his behavior, though the sincerity and depth of this work remained subjects of debate among those who knew him. The story of Elizabeth Bennett serves as a remarkable testament to the psychological strength required to maintain composure while processing devastating betrayal, the strategic value of controlling timing and circumstances of confrontation rather than reacting immediately to discovery, and the importance of trusting oneself to handle difficult situations with dignity and purpose. It demonstrates that silence and external calm do not necessarily indicate ignorance or acceptance, but can represent strategic patience while preparing for appropriately timed revelation. It illustrates that the most powerful confrontations sometimes come not from those who react with immediate emotional expression, but from those who channel their response into careful preparation and deliberate action. The case provides important lessons about recognizing that certain betrayals make reconciliation impossible, that choosing to end a marriage in response to profound deception represents appropriate boundary setting rather than failure, and that individuals possess far more strength than they may recognize when faced with circumstances that require extraordinary composure and strategic thinking. It reminds us that truth revealed at the right moment carries more power than truth revealed impulsively, and that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in immediate reaction, but in patient preparation for carefully chosen confrontation. If this account has provided valuable insight into the dynamics of strategic response to betrayal, the psychological fortitude required to maintain composure while processing devastating truth, and the importance of choosing timing and circumstances for confrontation rather than allowing emotion to dictate response, please take a moment to support our channel by selecting the like option and subscribing to ensure you receive additional family feud moments and compelling narratives that demonstrate human resilience, strategic thinking, and the various ways individuals reclaim power and dignity when faced with profound deception in their most intimate relationships.